right, hello, Doomloopers, and welcome to another episode of the Doomloop Dispatch, the show covering the worst parts of the San Francisco Bay Area. Though I would say today's topic is a much better part of the Bay Area. With me, as always, or whenever possible, is
D. Scott Miller. How are you people doing today? How you doing, Pecolia?
Hey.
Yeah. So today we have Pecolia Manigo from Oakland Rising. Last week they just had a press conference talking about how they're fighting against the Oakland recalls, the one against Oakland Mayor Sheng Thao, and then also the one against Alameda County DA Pamela Price. Basically, they respect democracy and don't want rich people to come and undo what the voters have voted for. Well, thank you, Pecolia, for coming on.
Thanks for having me. So glad to be here and representing Oakland Rising. I do want to clarify it's Oakland Rising Action. Gotta have action.
Action. Awesome. That's good to know. Oakland Rising Action. So, well, what inspired and pushed Oakland Rising Action to step up in this way and really make a public battle against the recalls?
Well, I think, we are not the first organization, but I think there are many organizations that have been for many months saying this is a very undemocratic component of what's happening in the Oakland and East Bay area. We've seen this uptick in the use of recalls by frankly, conservative forces, not just in the East Bay, but across California to unseat newly elected, explicitly Black, Latinx, API electeds from office within the first year of them being in service. And so as an organization that really does believe in changing the face of politics to be more representative of the electorate, right, of the voters. This is really disturbing. And, one of the things that I was looking at when we were doing some research was that, we've seen almost over 200 recalls a year for the last 5 years be initiated across California. And those have been all due to newly electeds being very much so representative of their communities. So the same thing is happening here in Oakland. Within a month of Pamela Price being sworn in as district attorney, the recall against her was already being formed. Some would even say that it was being formed the day of the election night, right? And then again, within months of Sheng Thao taking mayor, being sworn in as mayor, the recall against her. So that it's now coming out who's funding these recalls, thanks to Measure W, which is a proposition, a local ballot measure that Oakland Rising Action pushed in the 2022 election. Because of our concern around dark money and the use of it in politics, we're starting to see that these are not recalls that are being brought by people and residents in our community. They're really being pushed by millionaires who are using their wealth to undermine our democracy.
Right.
Yes, totally. And which makes me, wonder, in your mind, what is the motivation for Philip Dreyfus, who was just identified by Oakland side as providing 80% of the funding for the Mayor Thao's recall? What do you think?
Also large portions of Pamela Price as well. He's also involved with that as well.
Isn't it crazy?
Yeah.
I think that the motivation, for us and our analysis, the motivation is to stop progressive progress, right? To stop policies that really will support the community. A lot of folks are concerned about public safety, rightfully, but we also have to be aware that we're coming out of a pandemic that had significant economic harm to Oakland, particularly. I was at a different organization on the ground, really supporting parents of our public school students trying to survive this pandemic. And we just didn't, as a city, have the resources that we really needed for East Oakland, for the Flatlands at all. And then we still don't have those resources. It's very hard to find jobs. It's very hard to find housing. It's very hard to have hope when you're going to your local government. And prior to 2022, the answer was, oh, well, good luck. And not even just from city of Oakland, but also from Alameda County, right? There's still millions of dollars in ARPA funding, thanks to Parent Voices and other organizations on the ground, exposing that the money that's supposed to have been coming into our communities is not happening. So I think that sets the conditions for millionaires like Philip Dreyfus to say, well, we're going to blame these newly electeds for these problems that have actually been in existence in Oakland for decades, and are been exacerbated by the pandemic and the lack of the local government, both city of Oakland, but also we got to talk about Alameda County and the fact that those ARPA funds aren't being spent to help people recover and go beyond the economic realities of what happened during shelter in place. So, the perfect opportunity to exploit. There's a lot of organizations out there working to continue to raise this. I'm really excited to see Oakland side do this exposure. It's like, someone has to look at who's financing all this stuff. And why someone from Piedmont, Berkeley, there's other folks that have been exposed. Shout out to Care for Community Action. They've been exposing some of who these recallers that we see on TV carrying these signs. They're not even Oaklanders, right? Yeah. They're from other parts of the Bay, but they have such a vested interest in our electeds in getting rid of us. And I think it has everything to do with real estate. I think it has everything to do with the land grab that has always been behind the history of Oakland. And I think that, people need to wake up and realize that people are playing games to really make Oakland the suburban, suburb of San Francisco. And they failed to do a good job in San Francisco. These are some of the same funders that happen to be funding the recalls in San Francisco as well. And so, the question I ask us is, are we going to let what happened in San Francisco happen in Oakland? It's a very simple question. They recalled the DA in San Francisco. They recalled the school board in San Francisco. They're trying to, arrest homeless people for not being able to get housing in a very expensive city. Is this really the values that we want to see? And we keep promoting the negativity of what's been happening as good news, but that's not good news. None of this is good for our community. What's good for our community is giving people basic income so that they can recover from this, really horrific situation that happened in our city. We had so much surge of COVID. So many people passed away. So many people impacted economically. We should be focused on that. And every one of these people that are calling for these recalls, you never see them at city budget meetings. You never see them in the conversations around the solutions. It's always blame, 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 but they don't actually have solutions that are going to support our community. So I don't know. I don't know that, Philip is thinking about the implications, but clearly he's got a lot of money to throw at these recalls, and he's been doing it in San Francisco, and now he's doing it in Oakland, and I think we need to stop it.
Yeah. And also, I'm curious to know, because you brought up Chesa, right? You brought up Chesa Boudin.
Yeah.
But there is more racialized component when it comes to Oakland, right? I talk about this all the time. If you ever watch our podcast, we are the most diverse cosmopolitan city in the country.
That's right.
And so my question is, why do they think that being anti-Black or anti-Asian will work in Oakland? As opposed to in San Francisco, where they actually went after a Black woman on the school board.
Yeah.
And Collins over on the school board, but they actually were going after a white guy when it came to progressive DA. Why do you think that the racism is actually a component in a place?
Yeah.
How does that even make sense to
Well, first of all, let's talk about the DA, right? We haven't elected a DA different than Nancy O'Malley, the former DA, in almost over a decade. I think might even be more than a decade, right? So the habit of actually knowing what the district attorney does and doesn't do is not present in the East Bay, right? For Alameda County at minimum. And so I think that that's just a big thing. And if we look at every single DA that's been DA, they've all been white. Let's just call it what it is, right? So then here comes this woman of color who's run twice, was defeated the first time in 2018, but then came back, ran a campaign the second time, and was successful. And people have an issue with that, right? People have an issue with a Black female saying that there can be compassion in also holding the criminal justice system. Now, not everybody across the progressive movement agrees with, compassionate, reform of the criminal justice system. But we also want the best conditions to organize against mass incarceration. No one is supposed to be planning to incarcerate Black and brown folks. But that has been the evidence that our federal judge, that federal courts have said, not just in Alameda, but across the whole state. Y'all plan to lock people up, and you got to stop.
Right.
Yeah.
It's larger than just Pam as the district attorney. It's really the notion of like being told that you can't do something that's so entrenched in our state, which is plan to lock up Black and brown folks by any means necessary in our jails, in our prisons, wherever you can, right? We're in a process, and we have been for over 20 years, of undoing that thinking. And there are just some folks in our voter, community and in unfortunately Alameda County who are like, no, I don't want that. I want it to stay the same. And they're very vocal, even though it's harming every single individual, every single resident in our community to continue mass incarceration at the way that we have as a state, as a county, and as a city. So they pick a DA like Pam to be the blame for this level of saying we have to do something different that actually does rehabilitate, that does create different conditions, and that she's Black gives them an extra layer of being anti-Black, anti-against criminal justice reform, even though it's in the interest of the community. We need people to not commit crimes. But you can't hear that conversation right now because the large debate is, but there's crime happening and we need to do something now. Versus we don't even want folks to have the opportunity to think they have to do crime.
Right.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We don't want folks to think these are crimes of economic reality. And I appreciate the way that Councilmember Fife has framed that, and the way that other leaders in Oakland have framed this. And again, it's important for me to name these individuals because none of this is new. People have been saying this over and over and over again. We are trying to create an economic reality in Oakland, in the greater Alameda County and the East Bay, where folks have what they need and they don't need to commit crime.
Right.
That's the criminal justice system that we should want. One that we don't have to lock folks up because they didn't make the crime happen in the first place. So that's the role of the DA, is to say, well, how do I make that possible, right? When people make and do things that are just horrendous, yes, they have to have consequences. There has to be accountability. No one has ever said that that doesn't need to exist. But we also have to figure out a way to invest in the prevention more than we do just the consequences. And I think that that's just good policy, right? And we have to figure out a way to support folks when they're coming out of prisons, when they're coming out of jails, so that they don't keep going into the same patterns that create the conditions for violence. So I think that's the issue. That's all when we say criminal justice reform, that's what we're talking about. But we can't talk about it because everyone's so caught up in the harm that they've experienced. Everyone's so caught up in the harm that their family has experienced. And we don't, as a society, have mechanisms yet in place to really address that in a different way than lock them up and throw away the key. That doesn't work. It harms our community. It exacerbates violence. It guarantees it will happen time and time again. And I think that DA like Pam Price is willing to have the conversation, whereas prior DAs were unwilling. And that unwillingness has cost us millions of dollars in funding, millions of dollars in property damage, millions of dollars in harm. I do think that, the piece that I'll name, and I'm sure there's other questions because I could talk about this all day. The other thing that I'll name about this that we don't talk about is that she is a Black woman.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that as Black women who step into leadership, we are 10 times more criticized for everything we do. We saw news articles about her hair and that people didn't agree with didn't that sound just like what they said about Michelle Obama? Didn't that sound like the recent there's a whole conversation happening around Simone Biles. This woman just went off into our Olympic battle for gold, and we are not talking about how successful she is. We're talking about her hair. So there's this underlying tension that happens against Black women all the time, is that we are over criticized for everything we do, even when we are doing something that is just as similar as our predecessors. And I give props to DA Pamela Price on one thing, and that is that she did put out her report and said, look, I'm doing what my predecessor did. So tell me what I'm doing wrong. Mm-hmm. Not that I support, and I want to be really clear, I really do want our system to be transformed. But when you add the numbers up and you look at her progress versus her predecessors, it's not much of a difference. And I kind of joke with folks, did the courts get empty? Did the people not go to court? Is the jail empty?
Right.
Not do her job. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that to be, funny, but it is a real question. When you say she's not doing her job, what did she do? And I just have to ask, like, what did she do? And then we come to Mayor Sheng Thao, first Hmong mayor of a major city. Again, did she not do her job?
Yeah.
Right.
We just got a balanced budget. She just passed one. What the hell?
People might not agree with what they do, and I'm not here to defend them on their records. I'm here to just say facts as facts, right? These are women of color who are coming under attack because they are women of color. There's extra violence because they are women, and we have to name that. What does it mean for us to sit around as a community and watch women be attacked in the way? I'm all for holding folks accountable. I believe in that. I have lived a life full of holding electeds accountable and figuring out how to work with electeds to create policies for our communities that improve conditions for our communities. But going through a process of spending millions of our precious public resources to run recall elections at a time when we are struggling to do simple things like provide our young folks after school care, keep our rec centers open, the things that actually prevent violence. You cannot tell me that this election of holding 2 recalls at the cost of a couple of $1 million couldn't have been well spent in a different way. Give me $5 million for basic income for residents and for young folks. That will prevent violence. Give the small business owners who have suffered from violence that $5 million to recover and be able to keep their businesses open. There are a lot of other ways we could spend $5 to $10 million. The recalls is not the way. And that this is being backed by millionaires. Why aren't y'all making donations to these organizations who are struggling, who are not getting federal funding anymore, that are not getting state funding anymore? You have to start asking ourselves these kinds of questions around, why are you, with all this profit that you made because we were in a pandemic, using it to now unseat people who were properly elected?
Yeah. Great question. And so much of it too is, it's almost like they're only thinking about the original purpose of the police, of protecting property. I mean, we talked about Chris Moore, Tim Gardner, these people on the edges whining and complaining about how the city is run, complaining about actually crime. Data shows that crime is down, but it sure doesn't feel that way. That's all coming back to this whole idea of protecting property, which is why, you didn't see them involved with the budget discussions until the possibility that they might have to decrease police presence,
Right.
And the other thing, the other thing I'm really curious about. I've noticed that they have that sign behind you: special elections are undemocratic. I don't the thing is that I did a little bit of research and almost great. I researched recalls, the successful recalls. Gray Davis, Chester Boudin, the school board, SS school board, they were all special elections, right? Yes. And so the special election is actually a major part of a recall thing. Right. Yes. In order for the recalls to typically work, they have to have a special election.
That's right.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And because both of these recalls are now on ballot, right? It's more like a referendum than it is actually a special election. Even what do you think the end game would be, even if both of the recalls were successful? Which I'm just saying, mathematically speaking, from what I'm looking at as a pragmatist, you need a special election in order to make a recall work in California. But even if that weren't true, what do you think the end game is for these billionaires, millionaires, and who are backing? But let's be honest, right wing people who are backing this thing. What do you think their end game would be should they be successful?
I think that we have to be really clear. This is a moment of who has power and control over our governmental process, right? And so let's look at what happened in San Francisco, right? So got rid of the DA. What were they then able to do? They were able to push a ballot measure in San Francisco to now criminalize being homeless, to now criminalize being poor, right? Testing people to get access to basic incomes that they need because they don't have the qualifications or the capacity to work, right? Or to have rental housing in the city where they do work. We don't talk about how our unhoused and our poor cannot afford to live in cities that they have called home for a long time because millionaires want to make a profit off of real estate, right? The flipping phenomenon of the 90s and the early 2000s has brought us to a place where no one who works at a regular job can afford to live in California. The average rent is $2,000 a month. That means you have to be making 30 something an hour just to afford to live in the Bay Area somewhere. And $2,000 a month for a studio. We're not even talking about family housing. We're not even talking about, decent and livable housing sometimes, right? So I think that like their end goal is to continue to have that be the status quo. They do not want to roll back and be accountable for the fact that folks cannot afford to live here, that all this money is connected to hedge fund millionaires and real estate. We haven't even talked about, when we did some research on the DA recall, most of the recallers who are funding this are some of the owners of these new buildings here in Oakland. Pick one.
Kiefer. Yep. Kiefer
right?
Properties. Yep.
Yeah. So why are property owners investing in recalls? Because they want to continue to raise rent. They want to change the face of what and who is an Oakland resident, Alameda County resident. They don't want Black and brown folks here that are low income or poor or working class. We got to call it what it is, and that is the truth of it, because that's what the evidence shows. So yes, that's their end goal until we see otherwise, because we do not see them investing. We do not see them investing in the solutions that actually matter. You don't see them holding press conferences saying we gave $1 million to keep, after school programs. And I name that because I have served as a commissioner on the Oakland Fund for Children and Youth here in Oakland. Our budget is $20 million for all the youth in the whole city of Oakland. 20 million.
Wow.
So let's do the math. 2.7 million spent to qualify the recall for Pam Price, almost $1 million spent for Sheng Thao. That's 3.7, almost 4 million. Add that 4 million to the children's fund. And what could we have done? We could have funded way more programs, way more jobs for young people, right? So it's tit for tat, right? If we're talking about creating conditions where safety is real, then these millionaires are going in a complete opposite direction. They're trying to destabilize our local government. And nobody's talking about the impact of what happens should these recalls be successful. Right. So let's talk about it. If the DA is recalled, there's not even protocol at the county level around how she'll be replaced.
Yep.
Right? Why? Because there was no protocol updated, because the Register of Voters never updated the protocol in the county charter. So we did that in March, but question around legality of if that protocol should be applicable. So now we got to spend millions of dollars again to figure out if she has to have a special election post her election, if the recall qualifies and proceeds with a yes vote and people want to recall her. But let's also talk about for Mayor Sheng Thao. If Mayor Sheng Thao is recalled, we would also have another special election. So it doesn't stop. The money, the spending doesn't stop on November, we got to come back again and spend more money for another election. We're going to exhaust our voters to do a whole nother election because you didn't agree with what people did and you didn't want to participate in the civic process as it's designed. Show up to the council meetings, show up to the committee meetings where policies were actually being discussed, where budget was being discussed, and put your opinions in the proper place. So everyone is going to suffer because we're going to spend millions of dollars on these special elections because a couple of folks, and I do say a couple because we're talking about 40,000, give or take, individuals compared to 939,000 registered voters in the county of Alameda and 224,000 registered voters in Oakland. So when we say a small minority of individuals are having an oversized impact on our election process, that's exactly what we mean. Now, if they had submitted signatures with like 150,000 Oaklanders, different conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that it's paid for by millionaires to even qualify with a minority of signatures that were mostly gathered, let's call it real, in the hills and in North Oakland.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel democratic to me.
No.
That doesn't make me want our local government or to spend $4-5 million to do special elections. And by the grace of our organizing, we were able to make them consolidate these elections into the November. But we could have been having an election. The recallers were calling for a special election in August.
Yeah,
next week.
20 million just dropped. They expected Oakland to drop $20 million for that.
Exactly.
I mean, even as Oakland is struggling to just pull together the budget, and let's just take $20 million in August. Right. When we're pulling together our proposal, and let's just take that money.
Yeah. And I do want to address this, and I probably will get in trouble in this. Okay. But we have to talk about why and how Oakland got here. Oakland got here because we tried to compete economically with San Francisco for how much we pay our city workers, how much we pay our and I don't want to say city workers, how much we pay our police.
Yes. Overtime.
We now pay our police, even if you take overtime out, we pay our police, the cost of an officer, this was at the budget hearing, was $294,000 per officer.
Oh my God. We
as a city, and I say we not because I'm an elected official, but we as residents have to hold ourselves accountable, right? $294,000 per cop, okay? That's the salary, the benefits, that's not OT. And every year we get into a budget deficit because the police department does not have mechanisms in place and in our local government to ensure overtime does not exceed what's been budgeted. So what that means is we are basically cutting every other city department every time OPD goes over budget. And you can't just say, oh, crime increased. No, that's not what's happening. What's happening is there's an abuse of overtime. And I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, but I think that this is the conversations that we need to have. I'm all for being safe. I have personally needed police in my life. My daughter was in a hit, a car crash, total crash, process, right? Sorry, I can't even think, it's so traumatizing. And it was a serious mess, right? But by the grace of goodness, she was near the fire station on Bancroft. Police was able to be called. They were able to help her. I was able to get to her. But so, there are many of us who understand the function of police in our society on those ends, right? To be there to help protect us when those things happen. But at this juncture, we also have to have a conversation around, can we afford $294 per officer? We're not San Francisco. We don't have billions of dollars. We have $2 billion at most in our city budget on an annual basis. And the majority of that is going to police. Is that the right investment? Shout out to APTP, Anti-Police Terror Project. They're not saying, hey, we got to cut all police. And there's this myth that police have received major cuts. The police department is the only department right now in the city of Oakland with a guaranteed pay increase.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, like the whole mythology that the Oakland
defund
funded. I mean, that's just a myth. I don't even know where it came from. There's no news articles, there's no interviews. Nobody's ever said that the police have been defunded. So I mean, and the other thing is that how much do you think that say the police unions? I mean, we don't see a lot of that on the fringes. I mean, like right now we're talking about these like private billionaires and millionaires, but we also know that the police unions have been really behind the recalls both in San Francisco and in Oakland. Can you talk a little bit about that?
We haven't yet seen them, but we do know that they have strong opinions, and we're preparing to see what they end up coming out saying. But I do think that there is a lot of conversation that needs to be had around public safety, where the investments are going, and who is standing against having those conversations tends to be the police union, right? I think it's also really concerning that we are starting to see, this, former police commissioner, Brenda Harbin Forte, declared to run for city attorney. I don't think that that's good for Oakland. And that's not to express an opinion on behalf of Oakland Rising Action, but I do think that, there's concerns about how oversight of Oakland Police Department is happening, where the union is in support or not supportive dynamics, and why those conversations aren't being had on a public level citywide, so that everyone has understanding of how much budget of our city budget really is going into the police department. What are the concerns that need to be addressed? People complain in East Oakland all the time that they don't see police come when they're called, that you see officers called across multiple one call with a bunch of different officers responding, and the inefficiency of that. I think there are valid concerns and rightfully complaints about how things are managed when it comes to police, but nobody talks about it. They blame the DA as if the DA goes out and arrests people. They blame, like, I'm just keeping it real, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, not everybody is going to agree, and I'm not here to push any one line. I'm just asking these critical questions of us as a community, because they are important questions for us to ask, right? Why are we blaming a district attorney whose job is to charge individuals if their police is not doing their job, not encouraging them to go out and do more? Because, baby, we do not need more abuse in our communities by OPD or any police force. But I do think that there has to be a conversation around the majority of our general fund is being spent on police, and they're not being accountable to our community.
Yeah. I mean, it's insane how much is going to it. And the thing is, too, is, what people don't talk about, too, is that police unions can strike. They just don't vote and make a big deal out of it. They just suddenly, like, you'll call the cops and they won't show up, or you'll call the cops and they'll respond and just let the people drive away, let the criminals drive away and stuff too. If they want to make a DA look bad, like that's what they did with Boudin.
So frustrating. I forgot work stoppage. I mean, like that is, I mean, I don't know if you heard the story, but Boudin, right when he's getting ready to get recalled, he's getting ready to hit a fencing operation. And he got a bunch of U-Hauls, and they were going to go into San Francisco in the Tenderloin and bust a bunch of fencing operations.
Yeah.
And the SFPD said, "No, we're sorry. Like, we're not going to do that. We're just too busy." They really refused to be police officers. For him.
Yep. It's a political thing.
That's a real thing, right? And I think that the other component of this is who has control and access to local media. And I do think there's some things to be concerned. How did local media know about an FBI raid so much so that they showed up within minutes of it happening? I think there are critical questions that need to be asked.
Yeah.
Because, whatever, but these are things that you have to be like, okay, all of a sudden you qualified the recall, and then within 48 hours, there happened to be a random FBI raid. Questions to ask, right?
Yes.
within a couple of months of DA Price being sworn in, all of a sudden there's all this attention to staffing of the DA office. Nobody was concerned about it under Nancy O'Malley. I'm just asking critical questions of the community that are important for us to talk about as a community. If we're going to talk about that recalls should happen and be part of our democratic process, we also need to talk about what really is the cause of someone needing to be recalled. Did they break a law as an elected official? I don't know. I don't see any evidence yet. But I also don't have access to millions of, viewers like the local media. So there's an expectation that local media is doing their due diligence. But thus far, all we see is the negative. We don't see any critical reporting happening on a regular basis. I do appreciate Oakland side attempting to say, hey, here's the people that are funding this. Here's what we see. Here's what we can find. Here's the people we've asked. But why is it only one paper? Why is it only a couple of? Why is it KQED? Why is it a couple of critical KPFA and Davy D and all these local media that are really ethnic media, smaller media companies raising these critical issues? Why isn't Cron 4? Why isn't ABC News? Why isn't Fox? Why are these individuals who have reporters and investigators not investigating where these recalls came from?
I can kind of tell you, as a person who worked at both KPIX and KTVU, that it's because they have a symbiotic relationship. Police need the media to make them look good, to make them look heroes. That's why you'll get the hey, some cops rescued some ducks trying to cross the street, Right. But at that other end, the news, especially television news, is nothing without the help of the police. Because what is their footage? What are they filling time with? Car accidents, fires, arrests, shootings, and the cops will cut you off. That is something that is known. They will be like, oh, you're not giving us the coverage we want? Well, then you're going to be a little late and you're going to miss the scoops on some things. Well, I mean it's truly that symbiotic.
And you can look at that on a national level. I mean, access.
Yes,
access.
Exactly.
Yes, one of the reasons why Biden really started getting the heat, even before he had to step down, the heat was he was refusing to give access to legacy media. They were upset about not being able to get access to him. Right. So I think that maybe that is a part of it. Also, I think there might be a couple people on the take too. I'm not going to sit here and not say that. I do think there are a couple of local reporters who are actually getting money from these recall organizations, and I don't know how you can prove that. I mean, it's the only thing but they do sometimes have a tendency of telling the same story all at the same time. In a way that makes you think that maybe they're all in communication about this is how we're going to angle this story. And the perfect example being the FBI raid, and the way they did a framing there that made it seem as if Dow was already implicated. Yes. Right. And they tried to do the same thing, and they even went as far as to say that Rebecca Kaplan had been raided when in fact she hadn't been. Right. Man. So that became a part of the story on all three major networks, was that Rebecca Kaplan's home had been raided. And then what they do is when they get busted for that, they just do a small little apology and just keep it moving.
Yeah.
They make a big ass noise about it. And then so I think that that's, to me, that's the kind of thing that kind of indicates that local news in a lot of ways must be in on it in some kind of financial way to gain. Because you're not allowed to just tell a lie, like a flat out lie against your political enemy. And then you get and you're the news. You shouldn't have a political enemy. Yeah. So the news has Pamela Price as a political enemy. They have Sheng Thao as a political enemy. They have Barbara Kaplan as a political enemy. And it's just a coincidence that your political enemies are the political enemies of the recaller millionaires. Right. You both have the same So what exactly is your strategy for fighting back?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is to tell the truth, obviously, and to state the facts, to encourage folks to hear, what we're seeing and what we've been observing. And I think this conversation is a part of that, right? Changing the narrative from one that supports, let's move forward with these things without being aware of the consequences. Is a big part of our strategy. And I think the other piece is to just do what we do really well, which is educate voters to get out and vote. I think there's a lot of excitement at the national level. I think, my kid told me first around all the stuff going on. That's a first in our household. But I think that now it's time for the young folks to really get a better sense. If you believe in criminal justice reform, if you believe in being able to give our elected officials an opportunity to change decades of harm that's happened in our communities, then, and want to still hold them accountable, we have to vote no on these recalls, and we have to be able to then participate in the process to hold them accountable after. I'm very clear about that. Our organization is always clear about that it's not just about being at the ballot and voting at the ballot, but being a part of the process 365 days of the year, right? And so I think we're looking forward to seeing folks get out and volunteer. We're looking forward to seeing folks participate in the phone banks and the canvassing, and to be educated and to understand that we don't want to waste our public dollars, our taxpaying dollars, to support these corporations and their agenda. And then I think the other piece after these elections, we still have to prepare that the economy of California, of Alameda County, of the city of Oakland has no intervention yet in play. And so we want to make sure people are really clear that we want to sound this alarm now, that we have to have conversations around how to rebuild our local economy, how to support our small businesses. Shout out to the Real People's Fund that's doing work to really support small businesses to organize and think about what they need to be a part of our economy and to be able to support us. We have to make sure that our corporate landlords and our landlords across Alameda County pay their fair share in taxes. Yeah. As we found in the city budget, that there were 1,200 businesses, aka landlords, didn't pay their tax, and that helped contributed to our deficit in the city of Oakland. So we got to have hard conversations about what it's going to take to really create Oakland as a place that working families and low-income folks, and particularly renters, can thrive in. And that includes making sure we vote no on these recalls and get to the real conversations. So excited to see what we do as Oakland. I call this the battle for Oakland because it truly is. Excited to see folks get out and vote against the recalls, and then vote for the electeds that truly have the solutions that you need. Because if we don't vote for them and we don't protect them, we will end up in a scenario like San Francisco, where there's it's a war against being poor and working class.
Yes. And it just came out today in the San Francisco Standard that while Mayor Breed is not only ordering aggressive homeless sweeps, she's not giving them shelter either. She's giving them bus tickets. So basically, if you can't afford in the place you need to live and want to live, they are going to do all they can to push you out.
Yeah, and that reminds me of Giuliani's tactic back in the day, right? Like, so the whole idea, I mean, and unfortunately, I mean, Newsom is a major part of this equation as well. Out of sight is not out of mind.
No.
Right. So basically what you you sweep people out, but where do you think they're going to go? Well, they're going to go to more the low income places that are being neglected anyway. So I mean, to me, that just it's just mind boggling. Like, how you think you can just move people from one spot to another and you say it's over, right? No, it's not over. They're homeless over there now.
Yeah.
Right? They were homeless there. Now they're homeless over there. It's just, it's mind boggling.
It is mind boggling. And I think for me, it's a personal issue. I was homeless at 10. This is how I became an organizer, actually. I've been an organizer since I was 11. And because of being homeless, because of not being able to stay living in the Mission where I grew up in San Francisco, that's what started me on this journey to doing social justice. So people talk about these issues as if they disappear and they go away. They don't. And, we were homeless when San Francisco only had 2 shelters for families, right? Now, not much better, right? And it was, organizations like Homeless Prenatal that gave us our first and our security that got us out of being homeless.
I know Martha. That was a great organization. Good people.
Great organization. Changed our life. I can't tell you I would be the individual that I am today without those organizations' intervention when I was 10 and 11 of saying, hey, we see you as a poor student trying to go to school, trying to survive. And we don't talk about those stories. You don't hear those stories of survival, right? Of people who made it out of, domestic violence, who then survived and became great, like, Sheng Thao, right? I appreciate her for sharing that story because she gives hope to single mothers across the Bay that they can actually survive and thrive and do things. So we vilify folks in very serious ways. But if it was you or your family member, your tone changes.
That's right.
I say this all the time. Be careful the solutions that you advocate for because you don't know everybody's story. And if I've met people who have been unhoused who work full-time jobs, right? But just cannot afford as a renter to rent.
Yes.
So it always boils back down to what kind of economy are we building? And I think California made a grave mistake back in the 90s of allowing the culture of real estate being significant profit-making business to set. And the whole country is now suffering because we have made housing a profitable business versus a basic necessity. We have to come to a real conversation that across this whole country, no one can afford to pay rent. No one can afford to buy.
Right.
And if we keep going here, at some point, you're going to just be pushing people into the desert and saying, well, oh, well.
Yeah. It makes you wonder, too, how much the recall efforts were inspired by the win for Moms for Housing.
Yes.
Like how much of like, they've found a way to get back at us, especially, too, because it is profitable, or at least it doesn't hurt them to keep units empty, to keep things vacant. And I don't know if Oakland has a vacancy tax, but hopefully there's some kind of push to get that. And that actually reminds me, you got the recalls and you're fighting that, and I'm hoping you're also hopeful about winning against them. But also too, in the press release you guys sent out about your push against the recalls, there's so many great measures in here too. Measure FF, which is for paid sick days, stronger tenant protections. There's so much going on. How hopeful do you feel about those getting passed?
Well, those are all things that have already been passed. That's the beauty of
and I'm just not seeing them in the news.
Right? So like all the things that we have won over the last 10 years have been about the core issues for working families, right? And I think that's important for people to hear. You have renter protection because progressives push for it. You have worker rights because progressives push for it. The fact that tenants didn't get evicted was because progressives put a moratorium in place. That was not conservatives. That was not moderate Dems either. It was progressives who want to trailblaze to think about how we move forward toward improvement for the community. So yeah, we're going to keep doing anything and everything we can to push for the policies that will improve conditions. I really want to see us push for basic income. I think that that's a real conversation that needs to be had. If you can't get a job and you're doing everything that you can and you have skills, but no one wants to hire you because you're Black and brown, what are you supposed to do?
Right.
What are you supposed to do? We don't talk about in the pandemic that we almost closed the poverty gap because we gave people basic income.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? We almost made it impossible to be a poor child in the pandemic.
Yeah.
But as soon as we got to 2022, all those resources got eliminated. And we have to have real conversations around the role of the federal government in our local economies. Why are we seeing our federal government spend money on foreign countries versus in this country? We got to have conversations about that too. So it's all interconnected. Oppression is interconnected. Solutions are interconnected, right? They're not, one thing, then the next thing. If we could change things in the most positive light, we would be fighting for these solutions that people need today. We need better public schools. This is something that we hear on the doors all the time. People's concern about the future of their children.
Yeah, not charters either. Not charters that have a 1 in 5 chance of sticking around.
Exactly. So we have to be willing to have hard conversations in Oakland, but we also have to recognize that what we do here in Oakland is going to set the tone for what the rest of the country does as well. We've not been able to stop this in San Francisco, but we saw it coming here to Oakland. So that's where we get to be different, right? Oaklanders get to be different because we know how to fight. We know how to fight for Oakland. We know how to push for the solutions that are necessary. We know how to unify. We know how to stand united. What we need now is to do that from now until November 5th and make sure that that unity stands up on the ballot so that we can get to the hard conversations on November 6th, which is, again, how are we going to recover our economy? How are we going to make sure working folks can rent, can buy, can, thrive in Oakland, that our small businesses, and I emphasize our small businesses because we talk about corporations all the time. Our small businesses employ more employees than ever. And we're letting that whole part of our economy go away because we're comfortable with Amazon and we're comfortable with deliveries and things. Like I said, I can talk about these issues all day. I do think it's important. I'm like, wait, I got to actually go do some work. So I think that there's a massive coalition being pulled together. I'm really excited to see there's going to be a press conference coming up on that very soon, and hope to see people join the efforts to stand against these recalls, to really make sure that people respect the Democratic vote, and that people stay a part of the conversation. Oakland has really tough solutions to push and put in play so that people can stay calling this the town that we love and not the gentrification takeover.
Yes.
So what would be the best way for our listeners to get involved and get contact with the organization?
Absolutely. So you can check out Oakland Rising. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook at Oakland Rising Action. You can also go to our website, www.oaklandrisingaction.org. There's a volunteer sign up. Like I said, we need people to be out. We need to be at events. We need to be talking to our neighbors all day, every day till November 5th. We need to make sure people mail the ballots back. Ballots drop on October 7th. Just mail it back. That's all, We understand it's hard to take time off, but this is where we've really moved our movement forward. So looking forward to seeing you all get involved. Please check us out and look forward to encouraging everyone to be a part of the civic process for the next 365.
All right.
Yeah, awesome. This was inspiring. This was wonderful. I really appreciate you making the time.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving us this time and the information. Like I feel inspired and also fired up. So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, fired up. And hopefully we can have you on again, especially if there's any updates you want to share with us. Our mic is always open.
Yes.
Awesome. And look forward to maybe bringing some other folks because so many of us are fighting this fight. And I think it's important to not single out any one individual and ensure that we all have what we need to, give respect to every organizer.
That's right.
Awesome. So I'll make sure to put the links to your resources in the notes for this episode. Thank you again. And remember, everyone, to keep fighting the good fight.
Right on.
Bye.
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 All right. Well, thank you again, Doomloopers, for joining us for such a great episode.
Yeah.
Please follow us on all the socials, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Now I'm doing TikToks. Maybe Scott, we should get you to do a TikTok if you want to try it.
TikTok, I don't know. Yeah. But also don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. We need we need those numbers and that helps strengthen us. And also Patreon. Don't forget we exist. We're doing this for free.
Yes.
And, we still want to do it, but if not for free, it'd be great.
Yes, yeah, please. If you could help us out, chip in a buck or two, that'd be amazing.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah, totally. And we're unclear what we're going to be doing. We're definitely going to be talking about the riders in an upcoming episode. Maybe we'll tap into what's going on in San Francisco with both the school closures as well as the homeless sweeps. I mean, this revelation about the bus tickets is shocking and disturbing.
Yeah.
It's all, especially since in San Francisco, they were having people bust in and it's almost hypocritical to bust them out to somewhere else.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I think what we're going to be doing as well is like it's time to start asking questions about what brought us here. I like what Pecolia said, because we have to start talking about the history. It's not everything's current events. We have to start talking about the history of what brought us here. So, like, you know, I'm gonna start doing some digging. I know Kevin's on his way to doing it too. So keep an eye out for that as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. You have a great weekend, man.
You too, brother.
Talk to you later.
Peace.